Hendrick Motorsports could be facing some pretty hefty penalties as NASCAR has confiscated their lubers and Color Racing's lubers as well. And Ross and Denny Hamlin always seem to find way each other and had more contact this past weekend at Phoenix. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start by talking about Cheddars, as there was a report on Friday afternoon that Cheddars has gained more Twitter followers in the last 3 months since it announced that it was sponsoring Kyle Busch than it gained in the first 2.5 years of its race RCR relationship per Social Blade. This isn't a big surprise. Kyle Busch has a really big personality and a really big popularity as well, which is a big factor why we've seen Cheddars grow a lot on Twitter. And I think having Kyle Busch there has played a major role and major factor why Cheddars continues to grow. It's really awesome to see, though. Really happy for them and glad to see that Cheddars continues to grow. And I think their popularity is going to continue to grow on Twitter and social media as well throughout time, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Roblox. It was reported on Friday morning that NASCAR is launching a Speed Hub within the Roblox metaverse today, building off its initial deal with Bandimo that started in 2021. The hub involves a time trial racing game and lets users design upgrade virtual cars, get items, and search for 75th anniversary diamonds. This is really awesome to see that NASCAR is partnering up with Roblox. Roblox, of course, one of the biggest games in the world still to this day. And it's great to see that Roblox continues to have a pretty big partnership with NASCAR. I'm really happy to see that they're doing this. I'm really glad that they're still having a pretty big partnership overall. And glad to see that NASCAR has gone and partnered up with Roblox. We've seen NASCAR partner up with Lego recently. And now to see NASCAR partner up with Roblox overall is very exciting stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about D.L. Wilson. Now, during the ARCA race, D.L. Wilson was involved in a very scary accident that involved Tony Breidinger, Leland Honeyman, and I believe another car also was involved in the wreck as well. One of those cars being D.L. Wilson, who unfortunately in this crash suffered multiple injuries. Now, D.L. Wilson, from what we understand, is in good spirits, but unfortunately was rushed to the hospital and suffered multiple injuries. Wishing D.L. Wilson a very speedy recovery. His wreck really bad when he got out of the car. He was basically getting out gingerly. It looked like he was hurt. So I'm wishing D.L. Wilson the best of luck and wishing him a speedy recovery at this time as well. He's in good spirits, which sounds really good, and hopefully he will have a very quick and speedy recovery so he can get back to the racetrack as soon as possible, because I like D.L. Wilson. A lot of people in the garage like D.L. Wilson. Hopefully he can get back to the racetrack as soon as possible, because I think that a lot of people really want him to get back to the racetrack as soon as possible. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the ARCA race at Phoenix. Now, obviously, there were 3 races this weekend, the Cup Series race, the Xfinity Series, and also the ARCA race as well. Well, we had the ARCA race that took place at Phoenix. Now, this race is an absolute wreck fest. There were, I think, 12 or 13 cautions in this race. The race really did not have a big flow, and really the race was mostly dominated by William Swails. But on this last race, second to last restart, William Swails got turned by Bradley Erickson, and that would hand the lead to Tyler Rafe. Already got turned by Sean Higuerini earlier in the race, and he came back and ended up getting the lead. And on the late race restart, Landon Lewis jumped the restart for whatever reason. ARCA officials decided not to penalize him for that, even though he jumped the restart. But it didn't matter because Tyler Rafe was able to pass Landon Lewis down the backstretch on the last lap of the race. He was able to come off the corner and win the ARCA race at Phoenix. One thing about Tyler Rafe, he's only 15 years old, and yet he's already won an ARCA race. Absolutely incredible stuff. He'll be getting full-time for the ARCA West Championship and also full-time for the ARCA East Championship as well. So he'll be trying to do what Dylan Kwasniewski did back in 2013. I think it's really exciting to see what Taylor Rafe got the win. Needs to be also noted that Frankie Muniz finished 6th, so great to see for Frankie Muniz. He's currently 2nd in the points, which is absolutely incredible. Gray Van also still the points leader. It looked like Jesse Love was going to be the points leader after this race, but Jesse Love got turned by Connor Jones earlier, with Jack would also be involved, the 2 strongest cars up to that point outside of William. It could have taken out William. It's unfortunate stuff, but massive congratulations to Tyler Rafe on getting the victory done and getting his first career ARCA win. I think it's the first of many for him this season. I think he's going to be a championship threat and be a championship contender in the ARCA West season in 2023. I'm really happy to see that he got the victory this past weekend, in my opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Atlanta. Now, it's been reported and revealed, and Bob Cox reported this on Saturday morning, that Atlanta's pit road entry now is going to be in turn 3 instead of turn number 4. Now, why is it going to be in turn 3 and turn number 4? Well, basically because of how high the speeds are going to be at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I want drivers coming off of turn number 4, especially on the high line, and potentially causing a massive and a big wreck. I think this is a really good change, in my opinion, to have it now be in turn 3 or pit road entry instead of off a turn number 4. I think that having it in turn number 3, like I said, is going to make a lot more sense because you don't want these guys going from 190 miles an hour, 180 or however fast they're going, down to about 50 miles an hour. I think it's about 45 to 50 mile an hour pit lane speed, so you can't go any faster than that. So you don't want those guys basically making abrupt turns into pit road. In my opinion, I think this is overall a very, very good change, and I think it's a great change in NASCAR's side of the debate, especially for Atlanta Motor Speedway. You don't want any massive and big wrecks happening, and in my opinion, I think this is a very, very awesome and a really good change. In my opinion, I think this is a very, very good change. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about AJ Allmendinger. Now, AJ Allmendinger spoke to the media over the weekend about the last lap wreck at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. He actually says that NASCAR made the right call for them to not throw the caution. He says he's a little bit bruised, and he said I think he had a black and blue leg, speaking to the media as well after his wreck. Now, on the last lap of the Las Vegas NASCAR Cup Series race, there was a very, very scary incident. We did see the replay later. AJ, I think, hit the inside wall really, really hard and also got clipped. I think it was maybe Eric Jones or Brad Keselowski near the end of the race, which is unfortunate. But there was a big wreck on the last lap, and AJ says he's a little bit injured, but he was able to race this past weekend at Phoenix. Had a decent run, not a great run, but a decent run. Although I think he ended up getting involved in a wreck on the last lap this past week, so he might have aggravated that injury a little bit. But at least AJ's back at the racetrack and continuing to race through that kind of stuff. Seems like he's bruised up a little bit, but the good news is, seems like he's good enough to go ahead and race, which is overall a positive thing in my opinion. And glad to see that AJ is good enough to race. It's a shame he's a little bit injured, but it is what it is. And glad to see that AJ was able to race. Hopefully that won't be a big issue going, especially the road courses, because AJ is really strong at the road course tracks. So hopefully this won't affect AJ at those upcoming road course races here going forward, especially COTA, which is a week from this upcoming week at Atlanta. So hopefully he can improve, and hopefully that injury won't get too bad for him going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Todd Gillen. Now, Todd Gillen obviously was asking questions about, is he focusing on what Zane Smith and the 38 team are doing? Since this past weekend in Phoenix is the first of 5 to 6 races, I believe, that we're going to see Zane Smith in the 38 car. Well, Todd Gillen said he's not focused on what Zane is doing and the 38 team are doing, and he was focusing on what the 15 team was doing, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think it's good that Todd Gillen really doesn't have that mentality. It seems like he's not mad at Front Row Motorsports, which is a good thing overall. And you don't want to be mad at your own organization that you're racing at, considering the fact that you don't want to lose Todd Gillen or Zane Smith, especially if some other team like, Stewart Haas Racing decides to pick one of these drivers up going forward in 2024. But I do believe that Todd Gillen, he needs to continue focusing on trying to basically do the best he can. Todd Gillen did, I believe, end up finishing 32nd or 33rd in the race. He finished very close to where Zane Smith did. Zane Smith did beat him this past weekend, but of course, I think that Todd needs to continue focusing on his performance on the racetrack and see what he can do going forward. He's going to be back into 38 this week, I believe, at Atlanta, so he'll be able to get back into 38 and perform the best he can. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, Todd Gillen can continue to do a really good job with this team going forward and see what he does with Rick Ware and also see what he does with the team. But he's got to continue focusing on some great performances going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Finish Line Motorsports. Now, it was reported by Jared Haas and FrontStretch.com that Finish Line Motorsports plans to make their NASCAR debut at Talladega. And of course, the driver they're expected to have is J.J. Yeley. Now, he also reported that they apparently have 2 cars ready to go at this particular moment and 6 full-time employees. Now, one thing interesting about Finish Line Motorsports is they were supposed to make their NASCAR debut twice already at this point. They were thinking about making their debut at Daytona with J.J. Yeley in the Daytona 500, and they're also looking to make their debut at Phoenix with J.J. Yeley as well. But when they weren't on the entry list for Phoenix, I was a little bit surprised. But now it looks like their debut is going to be at Phoenix, is going to be later this year at Talladega. At least they've got multiple cars. At least the team is a real team at this point. Hopefully they can show up to the racetrack at Talladega. And a lot of people wonder, why would they go with J.J. Yeley? Well, J.J. Yeley's a driver who's reliable. I know J.J.'s not the greatest driver, not the most talented driver in the world, but he's someone who's very serviceable on the racetrack, who I think could have done a great job and a decent ride overall. But I think it's good that they brought JJ in, and someone I think that could really help this team just get up to speed and get up to the front. So we'll see what happens, but it looks like they're going to show up at Talladega, and we'll see what they end up doing. But they look to be making their debut for their team at Talladega here in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we do have a couple Kyle Busch stories that we're going to be discussing in today's episode, but the first one is Kyle Busch speaking on working with Randall Burnett. He says you're going to have good days and bad days, but he says it's generally really, really fun to work with Randall Burnett. Now, Randall Burnett, of course, is the crew chief for Kyle Busch's number 8 car. Randall Burnett has been the crew chief really for a long time with Tyler Reddick, when he crew chief for Tyler Reddick in the NASCAR Xfinity Series back in 2019 and brought Tyler Reddick to a championship that year. He's also crew chief for Tyler Reddick for the previous 2 seasons in the Cup Series in the number 8 car, where Reddick last year scored 8 victories that season. Actually, I think the last year, as a matter of fact, he's crew chief for Tyler Reddick. And then in 2023, he's now working with Kyle Busch. They've already scored a victory and have scored 2 top 10s so far this season, 2 or 3 top 10s so far this season. You look at this team overall and look at Kyle Busch and Randall Burnett. I think this is a pairing that is going to have a lot of magic, and I think it's going to win a lot of races over the season. I think it's still some growing pains with that team currently at the moment, no doubt about that. But I think as this season progresses and the season goes on, I do believe that you're going to continue to see both these guys gel together better, and I think you're going to continue to see a lot of good performances from both people going forward, in my opinion. So really exciting stuff for sure. I think Randall Burnett and Kyle Busch will continue to get better, and I think things are going to get better as things progress. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about William Swails. Now, it was reported on the ARCA broadcast on FS2, I believe that's where the race was broadcast, on FS2, that William Swails apparently has a 3-year deal with Joe Gibbs Racing. And once he turns 18 years old, he's going to go full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, William Swails currently at the moment is 16 years old, and I believe turns 17 sometime here in the foreseeable future. He'll be running full-time in the ARCA East Championship, but he will not be full-time in the main ARCA Series this year, as he's not 18 years old, and there's some big tracks like Michigan that he's not, in Daytona and Talladega where he's not allowed to run, because you have to be 18 years old to be eligible to run those specific tracks. William Swails had a dominant car at Phoenix. Looked like he was easily going to win the race, but there were a lot of yells near the end, thanks firstly to A.J. Moyer, who caused 3 incidents in the race, and I was kind of a dude who was a nuisance on the racetrack anyways. But William Swails, in my opinion, very talented up-and-coming driver. I think he's going to win some ARCA races for sure this year. I don't think he's going to dominate, but I think he's going to be very good. He's going to have some competition this year, though. I think his ARCA has got some of their depth back that they haven't had in a very, very long time recently. So, in my opinion, I think William, it's good that they brought him on for 3. Basically, they brought him on at least for 3 years. I think the deal could get extended, and maybe in the future he will be in the Cup Series. I think it'll be a little before he gets to Cup in the future, but I think it really is exciting to see that William Swails will get the opportunity to be full-time at least for 3 years. Eventually he'll be full-time at ARCA, and then when he turns 18, he'll go full-time in Xfinity. This is a really exciting opportunity for William. He should be really excited about that. I'm happy to see that William Swails is getting the opportunity to race with Joe Gibbs Racing, at least for the next few years. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. Now, Corey LaJoie basically spoke to the media, and the media had asked it, had Corey LaJoie been considered as a potential replacement for Chase Elliott? Remember, on social media, before the announcement actually happened on Tuesday this past week, Corey LaJoie was one of the names that had been rumored as a potential possibility to go into the 9 car, and Carson Osvar had been rumored to go to the 7. Now, eventually, Carson Osvar announced it was at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it technically was with Spire Motorsports, but it's with the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and that's with a partnership with Junior Motorsports. Will drive the 77 with basically Spire Motorsports, with Junior Motorsports backing. Now, when it comes to Corey LaJoie, he basically will continue to drive the number 7 car. Now, Corey LaJoie spoke to the media this past week, and he said he had never had any talks about driving the number 9 car. This is a little bit awkward because the media had basically been saying, hey, we're going to see him drive the number 9 car. And people like Mike Joy were talking about it and all that kind of stuff. Well, it sounds like it's officially confirmed that it's not true at this point that he was even considered as a possibility of the 9 car. Well, a lot of people thought because, one, he's good friends with Chase Elliott. 2, Spire Motorsports has a Hendrick Motorsports alliance. And also he wrote that letter over to Hendrick Motorsports a few years ago before going over to Spire Motorsports in 2021. Which when you think you connect the stuff, connect the dots, it does make somewhat a little bit of sense why people would have even considered this as a possibility. Though, and it wouldn't have made a lot of sense considering until this past weekend at Phoenix. He had a strong car for the first 3 races of the year. It had been really consistent. I think he's like 18th or 19th in points currently at the moment. But I do believe that we're going to see maybe in the foreseeable future things get better and stuff. So we'll see what happens in that. I think, LaJoie is a driver I think is really, really talented. I think he's going to get better with Spire Motorsports. I think they had an off week at Phoenix, but I do believe we're going to some tracks, especially Atlanta, where Corey LaJoie is really good at. He's one to watch. I think Corey LaJoie could seal the win, but he's been very solid to start 2023. Had his first not-so-great run, but Spire, compared to where they were last year, they've had a much better start. But I think it's not a surprise that Corey wasn't considered, considering the fact I think we're looking at Josh Berry as a replacement driver anyways, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe and Kyle Busch. As both of them spoke on, the F1 invasion is coming to NASCAR in a couple weeks at Circuit of the Americas. Obviously, Circuit of the Americas even got a couple high-profile former F1 champions. They're going to be racing in the Cup race at COTA. Kimi Räikkönen is going to be driving the 91 for Trackhouse Racing, which, of course, is a Project 91 entry, which, of course, Kimi Räikkönen does have experience with the CM already, as he drove the 91 at Watkins Glen. Jenson Button is going to run 3 NASCAR Cup Series races in the number 15 car for Rickware Racing with Mobil 1 backing and sponsorship. Chase Briscoe says he's really, really excited to work with Jenson, especially since Jenson, seems to be really getting used to it, seems to be getting up to speed with that. Of course, Jenson Button also going to drive the Garage 56 entry, so it makes a lot of sense. Kyle Busch basically also talked a little bit about having Kimi Räikkönen coming. He's also very excited to see that Kimi Räikkönen is coming back in. Said Kimi got a little bit of experience of quarter cut racing and really, really bumping and banging, all that kind of stuff. And he said that it really kind of helped. Probably he'll help Kimi that he's got a little more experience now in the car. I'm also very excited that we're going to have Jenson Button and Kimi Räikkönen come into play from Formula 1. And I think this next-gen car, we've had so many drivers make debuts. You got Jonathan Davenport racing at Bristol Dirt, which is exciting. I don't think you would have had that without the next-gen car. I just think it's so exciting. You have drivers from other forms coming in and racing with this next-gen car. And I think it's just exciting to see overall. So very happy about that. And they're both really happy about that as well. And excited to see that both those guys are going to be racing, and we're really excited about the future of the F1 invasion. I think it's really exciting to see that both of them are coming in, and maybe we get some current F1 drivers in the future. We'll see what happens, and it's exciting to see that both of them are coming into play and coming over to race. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch once again. Now, Kyle Busch had been asked about the new storms of the restart zones. And Kyle Busch basically said that he is not a fan of the new restart zones. Now, one of the reasons he says he's not a fan of the new restart zone is because of all the wrecking that has been going on in those restart zones. Kyle Busch definitely has a point. He's talking about what happened at Auto Club and basically said that Joey Logano was just anticipating one to go a little bit longer, and everyone else was also anticipating. Joey was waiting until they got across because he could wait a little bit longer, and everyone anticipated too early and caused a big wreck. Again, NASCAR, of course, this is, I believe, the last time we're going to have the new restart zones. NASCAR then will make a decision after this upcoming race, or if they're going to continue having the current restart zones or go back to the old restart zones. One thing I understand Kyle Busch's frustration. You don't want to have any big wrecks and drivers getting involved and destroyed because of anticipation and longer restart zones. I guess they just want to get more entertainment and more anticipation, but we've seen guys go in as late as those restart boxes, and when you have these restart boxes, sometimes you got to wait till you get across it, and you have to be in there, and you can wait till the end, and everyone else basically ends up running into it and wrecking each other. So it definitely understands frustration from Kyle Busch in that front, in that essence, because it is frustrating to see that you have a situation where you have guys running into the restart zones, getting involved in wrecks and all that such. And it is what it is overall, but it is also, I understand Kyle Busch's frustration overall. And I think it's just can be frustrating for sure, and I understand completely the frustration from Kyle Busch, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Fox broadcast. Now, there have been a lot of questions. We talk about the Fox broadcast a lot on the channel, and someone talked about the fact about the commercial situation. Well, Mike Joy responded to one of those people saying that apparently it's $25 million in right fees per broadcast of every single NASCAR Cup Series race year, especially at least for the Fox broadcast, is $25 million per every single race. So even the commercials having a tough time breaking even, which is why we see a lot of commercials. That's absolutely wild to me. $25 million a race for a broadcast. Now, if that is that truly $25 million, I trust Mike Joy on that front. If it's truly $25 million, that's insane. You think about, I think David Lane revealed this, but he said on Twitter that it's $20 million in right fees for the whole entire season for IndyCar in the number of commercials that they can have or the amount of sponsorship. $25 million per race is absolutely insane. That's a lot of money. That's almost $1 billion a year when you add all that up. It's like 36 times 25. That's what, like 400, 500 million a year in rights fees, and that's probably why I see all these full screen commercials. And it's just frustrating because if it's truly that much, that's absolutely insane. And trust me, I do trust what Mike Joy says. I do think the number's that high, and if it truly is that high, I hope there's a way they can negotiate that to where you're not paying $25 million per race, which makes a lot of sense why they have to have commercials. And they even say they're having even trouble getting even on that. So it definitely is frustrating to see that basically there is restrictions on what they can do and such. But it is what it is. And I'll say this. I felt like there were less full screen commercials this past week. Mike Joy also called out and said keyboard warriors. I don't think that's a win. It's like, okay, Boomer. It's a little funny, but it's like, okay, Boomer situation because I don't think it was too funny what Mike Joy said. But it's like we're all complaining about the fact there's a lot of full-screen commercials, and especially as a commentator, you can't let it get under your skin, especially as a lead commentator. And it's not Mike Joy's fault. Let's not blame Mike Joy for this kind of stuff. I've seen people blame Mike Joy for the commercials. It's just also race production and stuff at Fox has been really, really bad too, and it definitely needs to get fixed going forward. That being said, though, it is what it is. There's $25 million, though. I didn't expect it to be that much money. That's a lot of money, and that's insane that it's that much money for the broadcast fees, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Carpenter. As it was announced on Friday morning that Tyler Carpenter is going to drive the 41 for Nice Motorsports in a couple weeks at Bristol Dirt. Now, Tyler Carpenter made his NASCAR Truck Series debut last year at Knoxville Raceway. Got his name recognition after an incredible interview after he won the Gateway Dirt Nationals main late model event. And the driver who won the Gateway Dirt Nationals late model event got an opportunity to drive the 41 for Nice Motorsports. That was given to Tyler Carpenter last year. And Tyler didn't do impressive, but he did a decent job with the Nice Motorsports organization. I think the fact now that he has a little more experience, I think it is going to help Tyler Carpenter out quite a bit. And I think they brought him back in because he wanted a dirt specialist for that event. They could have easily had a guy like Ross Chastain or Kyle Larson come in and drive that car, but they wanted to bring a dirt specialist in, and I think it definitely makes a lot of sense to bring a guy like Tyler Carpenter in who has a lot of dirt experience. I think Tyler Carpenter is going to do a very solid and a pretty good job doing that, and I'm excited he's coming back to race with the team. I'm very excited about this. I'm looking forward to see that Tyler Carpenter is coming back into play and racing with the organization. He will drive the number 41. I think he will make the field easily for sure. I think the 41 car is in a pretty good position in owner's points in the truck series, and I'm excited to see that Tyler Carpenter is going to be racing in that truck race at Bristol. Really looking forward to that for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ed Jones. As it was announced on Saturday early afternoon that Ed Jones is going to drive the 20 for Young's Motorsports next week at Circuit of the Americas. For those who do not know who Ed Jones is a former IndyCar driver who raced in multiple major Indy events, nearly won some Indy events, nearly won the Indy 500 about 6 years ago, and currently runs full-time in IMSA. Ed Jones also has some pretty big GT experience, which I think is really going to help him out here. Plus, he has raced here at Circuit Americas, I believe in IndyCar back in 2019. He drove here in that race at Circuit of the Americas. Ed Jones is a pretty solid driver, in my opinion, to put in the 20 truck, considering he's got a lot of road course experience. And he joins a long list of road course drivers who are already running that Circuit of the Americas race. course, in the Cup Series right now, you have Jenson Button, Jordan Taylor, and then, of course, you have Kimi Räikkönen also joining, and others could potentially drive in the Cup race as well. And I think as time goes on over the next 2 weeks, because there's so many drivers who want to run, that are road course drivers, want to come back to race NASCAR, or just want to get into NASCAR for the first time, this is a really great gateway to get in there. And in my opinion, it's exciting to see how someone like Ed Jones coming in to work and basically drive for Young's Motorsports. It's going to be really fun to have him in there. I think the goal is to make sure he gets in the field, but I think he's got a really good chance to do that. And I think the goal is to try to finish in the top 20 in the race. That'd be a really great finish for them. And I think it's really awesome. We're going to get to see him race in the Truck Series with Young's Motorsports. Really exciting stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. As Dale Jr. basically said, I believe on a Dale Jr. down, he says he has spoken to Chase Elliott about what's going on with his recovery. And Dale Jr. says that Chase Elliott seems to be a lot more happier currently at the moment, and he still is working toward his recovery. Now, Dale Jr., of course, has been out before with injuries. Not the same injury. Dale Jr. suffered concussions. Chase Elliott suffered a fractured left tibia. It was approximately going to be out for at least another 5 weeks, but depending on how the recovery goes, it could be a lot longer for how long Chase Elliott is going to be out. Dale Jr., though, is a great person to talk to Chase Elliott. We've seen other drivers say they've spoken to Chase Elliott, one of them being Kyle Busch, of course, who suffered a very similar injury. We've seen Kyle Busch all say that he's spoken to Chase Elliott, and it makes a lot of sense for guys like Kyle Busch and Dale Jr., who have suffered injuries in the past, speak to Chase Elliott, who's going through a very similar situation and injury right now at the moment. And hopefully we'll see Chase Elliott get back to the racetrack as soon as possible. I am happy, though, that we got a guy like Dale Jr. talking to Chase Elliott. Again, I hope we see Chase Elliott back to the racetrack really, really soon. And I'm happy that we got to see someone like Dale Jr. come into play and talk about this with Chase Elliott, because I think Chase Elliott, I know there have been a lot of questions. Chase Elliott should receive a waiver. Chase Elliott is likely going to receive a waiver. In fact, I think he will easily receive a waiver with how the requirements are and stuff. I know there's been some charts that come out showing that NASCAR is a little more lenient on waivers than they used to be, but then again, they didn't start doing waivers until about 10, 11 years ago, and I think it makes a lot of sense to easily give Chase Elliott a waiver for sure. But I think it's good to also see that Dale Jr., though, has spoken to Chase Elliott recently, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Berry. As Josh Berry spoke to the media after the NASCAR Cup Series race this past weekend at Phoenix, and he is very pleased with the 10th place finish that he received this past weekend. Josh Berry has only had 2 next-gen starts up to this point, and in both of them, I think he's done a very solid job. At Las Vegas, he finished 29th. I know that's not a great finish for Josh Berry, but Josh Berry apparently had top 10 lap times, and also Josh Berry had a throttle issue and a throttle body issue that really ended up affecting his run throughout the event, which is why him finishing 10th in this one makes a lot more sense. And he basically was a top 15 car most of the day near the end of the race, especially was about a top 15 car. For him to end up finishing in the top 10, only his second next-gen start, only his 4th career start, is pretty impressive, and he's getting up to speed a lot more quicker. I do believe that we're going to see him continue to get better and better as time goes on, and I look at that Martinsville race especially here, because remember, he's going to run all the oval races, so he's running this upcoming week at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I believe that Josh Berry is someone to watch going forward, especially at Martinsville. He could win Martinsville. If that 9 car is as fast as it has been, and Josh Berry continues to get better and better, because he's gotten better for sure in the last week. And the fact that just 1 week alone, he's already improved so much from 1 week over, shows that Josh Berry is learning very, very quickly and getting up to speed very quickly and adapting his car very quickly as well. I think it's really exciting stuff overall for sure, and I'm really happy to see that Josh Berry is getting better and better and better. And I think he's going to continue to get better as time goes on as well. So it is what it is, and we'll see what Josh Berry continues to do. I think he's going to continue to get better and better as time goes on, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chandler Smith versus Kyle Busch. Now, this past weekend, the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Chandler Smith and Kyle Busch are teammates. But on the last lap of the race going into turn number 1, there was some contact between Chandler Smith and Kyle Busch that ended up taking place. They were battling really, really hard for a position going into turn number 1, and Kyle Busch seemed to get really, really loose and drifted up the racetrack, and actually, I think, got into the outside wall. Then he tried to come back down and get into Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith, of course, is able to hold on, didn't really have any damage from the contact near the end of the race. Just battling really, really hard. And Kyle Busch, unfortunately, dropped from 3rd position all the way back to 9th position. Now, after it happened, Chandler Smith is the only one that spoke about it in the media. He basically said that he felt really, really bad for what happened. He just felt like it was a racing incident, and he says he plans to go talk to Kyle. When I go back and watch an incident that happened between Kyle and Chandler Smith, in my opinion, a lot of people are easily going to blame Chandler Smith, especially Kyle Busch fans. When you look at the incident, though, in my opinion, I do put a little more blame on Kyle Busch because it seemed like Kyle Busch got a little bit frustrated battling Chandler Smith for 3rd. And granted, Kyle Busch was not going to win the race anyways, but if they worked together, they could have at least finished 3rd or 4th and gotten better finishes. Chandler still ended up finishing 5th, but Kyle Busch ended up falling all the way back to 9th. And Kyle Busch is probably about a 3rd place or 3rd or 4th place car all day long. Kyle Busch just hasn't had the race-winning pace or the race-winning speed since getting in that 10 car at Las Vegas last week. And I think Kyle Busch was also just a little bit frustrated with what happened or not being able to go out there and win. But it was going to be really tough to beat Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith was just lights out blazing, guns blazing, how fast that car was. And it made a lot of sense why Sammy Smith got his first career victory. But I think you're seeing a little bit of frustration with Kyle Busch at times. And we've seen that happen time and time again. And I think Kyle Busch just wants to do a lot better. And I think that he's still going to have a chance of winning at Xfinity races here. I think that 10 car is going to get better. It seemed better this week than it looked last week. But, man, I just hope that Kyle Busch can win an Xfinity Series race again. Wouldn't have thought I'd been saying that, but it is what it is overall. That he couldn't get it done this week, but in my opinion, it is what it is, and I think that he will get a win here in Xfinity, but I think you guys also understand a little bit of the frustration from Kyle Busch. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to give my thoughts on the short track package. Now, this past weekend at Phoenix, the short track package debuted at Phoenix. And obviously, a lot of drivers and fans have been speaking their thoughts and their minds on the short track package. And a lot of people, they're thinking, hey, this package does not improve the racing at Phoenix. And I'll be honest, the racing at Phoenix and the product on track that I saw at Phoenix wasn't very good. However, there's one thing that needs to be remembered. This is Phoenix Raceway. No disrespect to Phoenix Raceway. The track's got a lot of good amenities, and it's a really good facility, and the facility looks absolutely amazing. On that front, it does deserve a season finale. However, I'm not judging the new short track package based off of Phoenix, because in my honest opinion, this is not a great racetrack. Again, the racing at this track has been very, very subpar, especially over the last 2 years. The track doesn't produce great racing. So I don't want to see people saying that this package is a failure because of the race at Phoenix. I think that the true test for this short track package are going to come at Richmond and Martinsville, because those are the next two really important short tracks. Bristol Dirt is not involved with that. They've got all the dirt packages and stuff. But Richmond is the next short track race on the schedule here, and that's coming up very, very soon. So we'll get a really true test when we get out to Richmond in a few weeks from now, and that's going to be a really true great eye test to see how this package is. And then, of course, Martinsville, which is going to be another really great eye test as well. See how great the package and the racing is, which is about a month from now. But in my honest opinion, I know a lot of people looking at it. I think at times it did improve the racing a little bit. It was slightly better, in my opinion. You could easily pass for a little bit easier with this car than the last one. You wouldn't have been able to pass. The pack got a little bit more spread out as time did go on. But in my honest opinion, I did think this race okay. It wasn't, fantastic, but I don't think it was a bad race either. I saw some people saying this race is terrible. In my opinion, it wasn't a terrible race overall. So I really didn't hate this race by any stretch of imagination. I think that the true test, though, for the short track package is going to come a little bit down the road. And I think that is going to be at Richmond and Martinsville when we get a really true test, see how the short track package is. And if it's better at Martinsville or Richmond, then I know they did a better job on the short track package, because the drivers seem to enjoy it a little bit more for sure. But I think the racing will be better, hopefully, at Richmond and Martinsville, which is going to be the true eye test to see if this package improves the short track racing, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Ross Chastain versus Denny Hamlin. Now, it seems like these two always find a way to be near each other. Ever since the race at Worldwide Technology Raceway, these two have had a rivalry against each other. But it started all the way back at Gateway, where Denny Hamlin got turned by Ross Chastain into the outside wall, and Denny Hamlin tried to basically take Ross Chastain out of the race, and then you had a tag team between Chase Elliott, then Denny Hamlin, and Chase Elliott tag team to get Ross Chastain to try to get him out of the race. Then you go back, I believe, at Pocono, where they had issues against each other. Actually, Atlanta, where Denny Hamlin got turned by Ross Chastain in that one, though I really can't 100% put blame on Chastain, but Chastain seemed a little bit aggressive. Then Pocono, it seemed like Denny Hamlin got his revenge, and Chastain wrecked. Then you go back to Martinsville, where these two had more trouble once again. They had contact at Martinsville, and then basically Chastain ran it back at Denny Hamlin and actually passed Denny Hamlin to basically go ahead and get into the championship 4. Then you got to then go a little bit further down the road to the Clash, where they both had contact there. And now it seems like this finally, like maybe has finally ended, because Denny Hamlin has gotten his revenge a little bit on Ross Chastain, as Denny Hamlin forced Ross Chastain into the outside wall, and they both end up going from having a top 10 finishes all the way back to finishing outside the top 20 in 23rd and 24th place, which cost him really strong runs. Chastain was going to finish around 10th place, and Denny Hamlin was probably going to have a top 4, top 5 car near the end of the race, but unfortunately him and Chastain had their contact that dropped them far back. Now, after the race concluded, they both ended up talking to each other, so this could maybe be the end of the rivalry. But I'll be honest, just because they talked to each other does not completely mean that this is the end of the rivalry between Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain. When you look at this situation, I got to put blame on Denny Hamlin, because Denny Hamlin got loose and kind of forced Chastain up there, and they both end up losing a lot of positions. Ross Chastain definitely has every right to be frustrated and pissed off and upset. We're probably going to hear more of Denny Hamlin's thoughts about the situation later on his Actions Detrimental show, which is coming out later today, and we'll get some really great indication on that front, on that aspect. We'll get some really awesome insight on what basically happened between Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain. Denny will probably reveal everything that happened and probably what they talked about after, because Dustin Law reported they basically talked after the race, and we'll probably get some really great insight on what happened on that situation. In my opinion, in this incident, this was Denny Hamlin's fault. I don't know if this is truly payback or not that Denny Hamlin caused, but in my honest opinion, I do believe there might have been a little bit of payback for sure. I don't know if it was, though. We'll see what happens, though. We'll see what Denny Hamlin does say on Actions Detrimental later this week, probably, which of course will air later tonight on the Dale Jr.'s media, Dirty One Media, all that kind of stuff. That will be revealed, and all more details will come out about that very, very soon, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports in the 31 team from Kaulig Racing, as all of their organization's louvers had been confiscated by NASCAR on Friday. Well, at least Hendrick Motorsports louvers were confiscated on Friday. NASCAR officials apparently saw something they did not like. They let them practice, and after practice concluded on Friday, because they had a Friday practice session, a 50-minute practice session, the officials at NASCAR decided to go ahead and take the louvers from Hendrick Motorsports. Now, Kaulig and the 31 team's louvers were not confiscated until Saturday after they had done qualifying, and were confiscated later on Saturday. Now, a lot of people thought, oh, they were easily cheating, and this could be a cheating situation because you're not supposed to have any sort of modifications on the next-gen car. Well, Bob Cox reported this later, and I'm surprised no one really talked about this on any of their YouTube channels, but apparently this may not just be a Hendrick Motorsports cheating issue. This actually might be a manufacturing problem where there might be issues with the louvers themselves. Apparently not every single team got the right louver. So this could be a manufacturing issue, not a Chevy manufacturing issue. It could be a louver issue that Hendrick Motorsports is suffering. Now, even though that they might be that, if they modified the next-gen car, even if Hendrick did, even if it's for that, they could still potentially get some pretty hefty penalties. What do I mean by that? Well, last year, NASCAR made a rule saying that do not mess with the single-source vendor parts. It needs to be noted, like I said, do not mess with those parts. Last year, multiple teams were penalized 100 points, and playoff points were penalized while and crew chiefs were suspended. Last year, you had Brad Keselowski in the 16 get penalized 100 points and lost 10 playoff points, and we saw that crew chief get suspended there. Then you go over to the number 34 car for Michael McDowell's team, and they basically got their penalty, a 100-point penalty as well. And Kevin Harvick's team also got a 100-point penalty as well for messing with a single-source part. I believe the louvers are a single-source part, so you're not supposed to modify those single-source parts. Now, one thing that could help Hendrick Motorsports to put that in their favor is it was confiscated in practice and basically wasn't confiscated during the race. It wasn't something that was found in the R&D center. A couple drivers like Christopher and Ross just seen, they're basically going to have their cars basically brought over to the R&D center, so they may end up having some penalties coming their way in the future as well if they basically do have something that happen. But if they did, like I said, mess with a single source part, they could get penalized. But What could have helped that team compared to other teams is this was found during practice. Maybe they might get their penalty not hefty, but they could still be receiving some pretty hefty penalties. There are two things that could honestly happen. Number one, NASCAR might just go ahead and fine them. They might fine them. They might not penalize them any sort of points, but they might fine them because they did still get it caught. But if there was a modification, they might also receive a point penalty. There's a good chance they also could, like I said, receive a 100-point penalty for modifying a single source part. You're not allowed to do that. It could be an L2 penalty or L1 penalty. I could see him also getting 50-point penalties and pretty hefty fines and maybe a loss of a couple playoff points. Either way, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, because they're going back to the R&D Center, it's going to be interesting to see. And maybe NASCAR, because they see that it's a manufacturing problem, because it seems like this might not even be Hendrick Motorsports trying to cheat in this situation. It might be just a manufacturing issue. And if that's the case where it is a truly manufacturing issue, NASCAR might let them off scotch-free. And obviously, they probably found something in the Garage 56 entry, which something I have not seen a lot of people bring up, is the fact, remember, Hendrick Motorsports is really behind the Garage 56 entry, so that's probably helping a lot as well. Having that Garage 56 entry, they probably learned something from that. So they probably could have been learning something from that and helping out there. But again, you don't want to basically have these teams getting huge advantages over, but it seemed like that it didn't matter because Hendrick Motorsports are just really dominant. So we could be seeing some pretty huge penalties for William Byron, Alex Bowman, and Kyle Larson for sure. Now, I'm not mentioning Josh Ray because Josh Ray ain't going to lose any points anyway since he's not ineligible. But this will hurt the number 19 and Chase Elliott's organization, and this will hurt the other organizations. But when you look at how fast Hendrick Motorsports has been, especially over the last 2 weeks, this isn't like RFK, Front Row Motorsports, or Kevin Harvick's team, for that matter, that were kind of not as fast. I think that Hendrick Motorsports will be able to bounce back easily. Alex Bowman is a points leader, and if he would lose 100 points, he'd be only 30 points below the cutoff line, so Bowman would still have a really good chance getting back in the playoffs pretty easily, and honestly wouldn't be too far behind the grid. And then, of course, there's some other drivers would be in really, really great shape. I mean, Larson would be about 45 to 50 points back, and William Byron would be about 40 points back. So they'd be a little bit farther back with how fast Hendrick Motorsports has been. You just got to win a race now, and William Byron's already guaranteed in the playoffs anyways because he's got 2 wins this season. So if he runs all the races, he'll be guaranteed in, unless, of course, he does need a waiver. But, like I said, there could be some huge penalties coming for Hendrick Motorsports' way. Jeff Gordon said that the Luber situation does not affect their performance, did not affect their performance, and I agree. You look at how fast Hendrick Motorsports been. I just think Hendrick Motorsports in general right now, they are the team to beat, in my opinion, and they have just looked so stout and looked really great to start 2023. So it is what it is going forward. We'll see what penalties do come out, but there could be some huge and hefty penalties coming out in the foreseeable future for Hendrick Motorsports. They'll either be coming out tomorrow or be coming out Wednesday. And whenever they do break, we're going to be talking about the official penalties, or if they do receive penalties, we talk about those on the channel here when they do officially reveal if Hendrick Motorsports does have any penalties that come out from that team. We're going to find out tomorrow or Wednesday if they do receive any penalties. So that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the channel notifications on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are down below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Hendrick Motorsports will receive any penalties or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin always seeming to find a way near each other? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have, later on the channel today, we are going to have the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race picks for Atlanta. Tomorrow on the channel, we're potentially going to have an entry list video more than likely, and also we'll be potentially reacting to the penalty board as well. And might also have the Xfinity Series race picks as well. Then on Wednesday of this week, we will have another NASCAR news video, and then, of course, we potentially have the paint scheme video. Then Thursday will be the race picks video on the channel for the Cup race at Atlanta. And we got a lot of other content on the way as well that I think you're going to enjoy. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.